Looking for a book that's atmospheric but not too scary? Then you're in the right place. Today I'm sharing 5 Gothic novels perfect for cozy autumn evenings. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life and welcome to a video about a type of novel that is one of my very favorites. And this is the season of spooky, atmospheric, moody, dark reads. And while I don't like my books to be scary per se, I do sometimes enjoy that slightly darker, more eerie type of a book, and the Gothic novel is the perfect cure for when I'm in that type of mood. I fell in love with the Gothic novel when I took a wonderful college course celebrating all things Gothic, and I had the most wonderful professor. We read so many wonderful books. There wasn't a single book we read for that class that I did not enjoy. And I thought this was the perfect time of year to share with you a few of the classic novels that fall into the Gothic genre, and also a few modern Gothic or Gothic style novels that I think you will enjoy as well. And then I have one bonus pick actually, because I'm currently reading a book and I think it's going to be a Gothic or Gothic style novel that's going to go onto my favorites list for this year. Grab yourself a cuppa, curl up somewhere warm and cozy, and let us get into the 5 Gothic novels I recommend for autumn reading. Now you may be wondering, what exactly is a Gothic novel? And a Gothic novel has a kind of specific but also kind of vague parameters to it. It originated with the Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, which you may be familiar with if you've read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, because that book is referenced throughout Northanger Abbey and it is considered the very first Gothic novel. The Gothic novel contains lots of different elements. Obviously, as I mentioned at the intro, there is a very sort of dark, moody atmosphere to these books. There is often lots of fog. There is often a desolate setting, and the setting often takes place in a house or building that is large, it's creepy, it's got a lot of space to it, a lot of hidden spaces to it, and that location features prominently in the book. Gothic novels can also feature elements of the supernatural. Oftentimes, especially in the early days of the Gothic novel, they were pitting science against religion. And so you'll see a lot of that conflict within the Gothic novel. So that is definitely a theme that goes throughout. As we get more modern, there is a little bit less of that, but that same pervasive atmosphere, that dark, moody feeling, oftentimes with a crumbling mansion at the centerpiece of the setting, or a very desolate location, all of those things, along with often there is a young female heroine who is in some sort of peril or at a crossroads, or there's just something going on in our main character's life where things seem unsettled. And so we're going along with them as they're trying to figure out what is going on or get to a more settled place in their life. Oftentimes, Gothic novels don't necessarily have happy endings. People don't necessarily live happily ever after. Though, well, I will say a number of these books that I'm going to talk about today have either ambiguous or not happy endings, but I do still think they make for wonderful reads, especially at this time of year when it gets dark early and you just want something that you can really kind of settle into the feeling and the emotions of a book. And I think the Gothic novel will really give you that flavor. Okay, enough of the preamble. So that's just kind of a general overview of the Gothic novel, and there are certainly more themes and elements that can be a part of it. But I think if you aren't familiar with what qualifies as a Gothic novel, that will get you started. I'm going to start us off by talking about the classic Gothic novels that I recommend. I'm going to start with one that is very, very famous and you are all familiar with. It's been made into many movies. It is a classic for a reason, but if you have never read it or if it's been a long time since you have, I think it's worth picking up. And that book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Now, there is a lot of lore around how Frankenstein originated. It supposedly came out of kind of a dare. A number of authors were together, Mary Shelley and her husband and a few other people, and it was to come up with, I think, a kind of scary type of a story. And this is what Mary Shelley came up with, was Frankenstein. And Mary Shelley has done something really incredible with Frankenstein. So in this, we have a doctor, Dr. Frankenstein, and he wants to reanimate a corpse. That's the crux of the story. I think we're all familiar with it, that is what happens, and he brings this creature to life. I think oftentimes in our modern media, we get confused between Dr. Frankenstein and the monster or creature that he creates. That is not Frankenstein. So if you've been under that impression that the big creature is Frankenstein, he is not. He is the monster or the creature. And the doctor is Dr. Frankenstein. And we really follow along with first Dr. Frankenstein, and then we also get the monster's perspective. And one of the things that I love about Frankenstein, and that I think is something that is often done in the Gothic novel, is that the Gothic novel is structured as if it's, say, a manuscript or a letter being written by somebody outside of the story or somebody within the story but after the fact. And so you are getting this kind of outsider's viewpoint or retrospective viewpoint, and it lends validity to the story. That was the reason for this particular type of structure for the Gothic novel, because it was often supernatural or felt very, not of this world. And in order to ground it in this world, it was given that structure where here it's actually, I found this manuscript, I found these letters, and here's the story, and I am going to tell it to you now. A couple of years ago, I reread Frankenstein and I listened to the audiobook narrated by Dan Stevens of Downton Abbey fame. If you have never listened to an audiobook narrated by Dan Stevens, and you enjoy audiobooks, definitely rectify that, because he is fabulous. And this edition of Frankenstein is wonderful. So gripping. I could not stop listening. This is an Audible original, so you can only listen to it on Audible, this version by Dan Stevens. And if you don't have an Audible account, you can head straight down to my description box. I have a link to Audible. You can go there and get yourself a membership and try out. They have lots and lots of Audible original narrations that are really, really wonderful, and I highly recommend them. And this one by Dan Stevens is no exception. I do think sometimes classics can feel a little bit overwhelming to people, and if it does, I definitely think listening to the audiobook is a wonderful way to go, especially when narrated by somebody who's a professional actor or professional voice actor, because they really give nuance and gravitas to the narration of the book, and it just adds so much to the experience of reading it or listening to it that way. Highly recommend. So Frankenstein is my first Gothic novel pick for autumn reading. My next classic Gothic novel that I recommend is one that's a little bit on the shorter side when it comes to Gothic novels. Gothic novels tend to be on the lengthier side, like many classics do, but this one I think is actually very readable, and it's not too long. It's under 250 pages, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And you may be familiar with the story of The Picture of Dorian Gray, but basically the gist is there is this man who is eternally young, and he stays young because there is a picture of him that is aging. And so he will not age as long as this photo exists. And it delves a lot into the nature of humanity, of aging, of our life on this earth and what that means and what our time here is spent doing, and also sort of the vanity of youth. And this is such a fantastic story. Like I said, it is highly readable. Oscar Wilde is a fantastic author. I know most people know him as a playwright. This is his one novel, and it is so very good. I am overdue for a reread of this, and I cannot wait. It is going high on my TBR for next autumn's reading. My final classic pick for a Gothic novel to read this autumn is by an author who I think many of her books could be classified as Gothic novels. Probably most of them, actually. And I decided not to pick her most famous book, but another one which you may have heard of, but you may not have read yet, and that is My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. Of course, Rebecca is a wonderful, wonderful example of a Gothic novel, but My Cousin Rachel is equally so. And in this, we have a young man, and he is sort of beholden to his cousin, who has kind of inherited the family's wealth. He lives with his cousin. His cousin goes off to Europe from England, and while he is there, he marries this woman, Rachel, whom our main character and narrator never meets until after his cousin has died, and then she comes to England, and we follow along as we try to understand who is Rachel and what exactly is she trying to do. Is she really the wife of the cousin? Was she really married to him? And what is she doing here? And what are her motivations? And it's very psychological. It's very suspenseful. It is so well done. And the ending of this is one you're going to want to talk about with people. So if you read it, let me know, and I'd be happy to chat about it with you, because it's an ending that I still think about. And I read this book a few years ago now already, and it is fabulous. Now we're going to move on to some more modern Gothic novels, and my first novel is one that when I read it when it first came out, I purchased the book, went home, started reading it, and did not stop reading it until I finished it. And that book is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Not only is this a fabulous example of the modern Gothic novel, but it is a wonderful book for book lovers. So in this, we follow Margaret. She is a young woman. She's a biographer, and she is called to the home of this reclusive author, Vida Winter, I believe is her name. Vida has kind of spent her life just telling all kinds of stories about herself. Are they true? Are they not true? Nobody knows. Margaret has her own secrets as well, and we kind of follow along as all of those secrets kind of start to unravel throughout the course of the book. This is such an atmospheric and fantastic read, and if you want something that's Gothic but more on the modern side, then absolutely pick up The 13th Tale. It is one of my favorite books, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. And it's a great place to start if you've never read a modern Gothic novel. And my final pick for a modern Gothic novel is a book by another author who I think many of her books could be considered Gothic or Gothic in style for sure. And I think she is one of the best modern authors of this ilk. And the book I've picked to share with you today is The Distant Hours by Kate Morton. In this, we follow a young woman who receives a letter that was intended for her mother decades ago, and it sends our main character off to this castle where her mother was billeted as a young girl during World War II. And we follow along with the story of the three Blythe sisters who live in the castle. The older two sisters are twins, and their younger sister is maybe not... She's had some hard things happen in her life, and she's never been the same since. And we follow along, again, lots of secrets coming to light. We're in this crumbling old castle. I adore Kate Morton's writing. I mean, I could have picked so many of her books. The House at Riverton is a fabulous example of the Gothic novel. The Forgotten Garden, The Secret Keeper, Homecoming, all are fabulous. All could probably qualify as Gothic novels, but I decided to mention The Distant Hours because it is fantastic, and it's got that really creepy castle setting, which I think is just so perfect if you're really looking for that particular Gothic element in the story that you're picking up. But I highly recommend this one, or just Kate Morton in general, whichever one sounds good to you. Perfect for autumn Gothic reading. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I do have one bonus book for you today, and that is the book that I just started reading. And even though I'm only in the first chapter, I can already tell this is very, very Gothic in style. And that book is The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. I'm just going to read you a little bit from the first paragraph because I was immediately drawn in, and it feels very Gothic just from these few little lines. It says, I first saw Hundreds Hall when I was 10 years old. It was the summer after the war, and the Ayerses still had most of their money then, were still big people in the district. I recall most vividly the house itself, which struck me as an absolute mansion. I remember its lovely aging details, the worn red brick, the cockled window glass, the weathered sandstone edgings. They made it look blurred and slightly uncertain, like in ice, I thought, just beginning to melt in the sun. Such a fantastic description. Like I said, setting is so important in the Gothic novel, and I am definitely getting that feeling from this book. I have very high hopes for this. I really, really think this is going to be a book that I love, and I can't wait to see where it goes. So if you want to give it a try, I can't 100% recommend it, but I will be back to tell you my thoughts about it as soon as I do finish it. So if you want to wait until then, you can, but I'm giving this as like an advanced recommendation as a Gothic novel, a modern Gothic novel you could pick up in the autumn, because it definitely feels perfect for this time of year. And that will wrap it up for Gothic novels that I recommend for autumn reading. Let's chat down in the comments. There are so many wonderful Gothic novels out there. I had a really hard time narrowing it down. I mean, my favorite classic of all time is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. That's definitely could be classified as a Gothic novel. I could go on and on, from Dracula to The Woman in White to The House of Seven Gables. I mean, there are just some fabulous books out there. But I want to know, what are your favorite Gothic novels? Do you enjoy Gothic novels? Have you ever read a Gothic novel? If you haven't, are you open to doing that? Let's chat all things Gothic novels down in the comments below. And since it is spooky season, if you're here but you don't have anything you'd like to add, but you'd like to leave a comment, because they really do help my channel, leave something spooky and Gothic, a old house or rustling leaves, a ghost, whatever it is, a black cat. I had to wear my black cat sweater today. That seemed appropriate for the Gothic novel video. So definitely leave those emojis in the comments. I love seeing them, and they'll add a little bit of atmosphere to the comment section as well, so that will be fun. And if you enjoyed this video, if you could hit that like button, likes really, really do help my channel, and also subscribe, because I'd love to have you join my bookish community, and the more of us, the merrier. And I want to thank you all so much for being here, for taking time out of your day to not only watch my videos, but leave such lovely comments as well. I love seeing those and responding to you and having bookish conversations. So thank you so much for taking time to spend it here with me in my cozy corner of booktube. And I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye!